African woman found unconscious with a baby. What the Arab executive did next will leave you speechless. An Arab billionaire executive was driving alone on the edge of the Sahara when he saw something that made his heart stop. A barefoot woman, her skin cracked from the sun, lay unconscious on the sand, clutching a silent baby in her arms. He had every reason to keep driving. He was already late for a crucial meeting that could shift millions. But something in her stillness, in the quiet desperation of that child, forced him to stop. What he did next would not only change her fate, it would transform his own soul. What started as a random encounter on a deserted road would unravel a story so powerful, so deeply human, that it would leave the world breathless. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications. This helps us bring more inspiring stories like this to you. The desert road stretched endlessly ahead of him, a shimmering ribbon of heat and silence. Zayed al-Masri, a 42-year-old Arab executive with 1,000 meetings behind him and $1 billion empire at his fingertips, gripped the steering wheel of his matte black Land Rover Defender. He wasn't supposed to be here, not on this forgotten road between Nouakchott and the edge of the Sahel. His private jet had suffered a delay in Casablanca. Restless, Zayed had decided to drive across the border instead. He needed to think. Or maybe to feel something. He hadn't felt much in years. The world knew him as the man who had transformed oil wealth into clean energy leadership, tech startups, and philanthropy foundations. But behind the tailored suits and international accolades was a man who hadn't cried since his father died, a man who had once believed in God and then stopped. But that afternoon, something caught his eye that shattered the silence of his mind. A dark figure, lying on the sand, right where the dust-colored earth met the cracked asphalt. At first, he thought it was a bundle of clothes, maybe left behind by a traveler. But as he slowed the car and approached, his breath caught. It was a woman. A young African woman, no older than 30. Her braids were stuck to her forehead with sweat and dirt, and her skin was dry and tight, sunburned. Her arms were curled around something. Zayed parked and stepped out, the door slamming behind him with finality. "Miss?" he called out, crouching beside her. His voice cracked. She didn't move. Then he saw the baby. It was swaddled in cloth, no more than a few weeks old. Its tiny chest rose and fell, barely. Zayed's heart, long silent in its cage of logic and control, did something it hadn't done in years. It stammered. He reached out, fingers trembling, and touched the woman's shoulder, still warm, but unresponsive. He checked for a pulse, weak, but there. He looked around. Nothing. Just sand, dry trees, and endless sky. No help for miles. "I can't leave you here," he whispered. He scooped the baby into one arm and carefully lifted the woman into the other. She moaned softly, her lips cracking as she tried to speak, but no words came. Inside the car, he turned on the air conditioning full blast and reached for a bottle of mineral water from the center console. He gently touched it to her lips. The woman swallowed instinctively. The baby stirred and let out a small, hoarse cry. Zayed dialed the satellite phone. "I need coordinates for the nearest emergency clinic now," he snapped to his assistant back in Doha. Minutes later, the GPS lit up with a red dot 27 miles northeast. He drove faster than he ever had. Who was she? What had happened? Had she been walking through the desert with a baby? Why? As he looked into the rearview mirror and saw the child's eyes open, wide, dark, and filled with something indescribable, Zayed felt the weight of everything he thought he understood begin to crack. This was no ordinary moment, and somehow he knew this woman, this child, would be the beginning of something he could never undo. As the first buildings of a small desert clinic appeared in the distance, the baby let out a sudden, sharp cry, and Zayed glanced down in panic. Something was wrong. He pressed the gas, and then the woman's hand shot out, grabbing his wrist with surprising force. Her lips moved. He leaned in, barely catching the whisper. "Don't let them take him." Zayed's heart stopped. Take him? Who? Why? He pulled into the clinic, tires screeching, and as the doors burst open and doctors ran toward him, a single question echoed in his mind. What had he just walked into? The clinic was small, barely more than a sun-worn building surrounded by dust and forgotten time. Yet inside, it buzzed with urgency as the nurses rushed the unconscious woman through the faded double doors. The baby, still in Zayed's arms, whimpered softly, eyes too wide for such a small face. Zayed stood frozen at the threshold, his shirt damp with sweat, the woman's final words repeating in his head like a riddle. "Don't let them take him." He had no idea what she meant. A nurse, her white scrubs stained with red Saharan dust, approached him gently. "Sir, you should let us take the baby." Zayed hesitated. I'll come with him." The nurse nodded, sensing the steel behind the man's quiet voice. She led him to a side room, sterile, cool, and empty. A doctor entered moments later, middle-aged, glasses fogged from the heat, eyes sharp and tired. "We're stabilizing the woman," the doctor said, glancing at the baby in Zayed's arms. "She was severely dehydrated. She wouldn't have lasted another hour in that sun." Zayed nodded. "And the baby?" The doctor examined the child quickly, frowning. "Malnourished, but strong. He's lucky, very lucky." "His mother, she said something," Zayed began. "She said, 'Don't let them take him.' What does that mean?" The doctor's hands paused. He looked up slowly. "You don't know who she is?" Zayed shook his head. I found her by the road. The doctor exchanged a glance with the nurse beside him. She might be from one of the refugee camps north of here, the doctor said slowly. But there have been rumors. Women and children disappearing. Some talk of smugglers. Others talk of something worse. Zayed felt a chill despite the heat. You think someone was after her? The doctor's jaw clenched. We've seen things. Mothers show up here with babies, terrified. Some of them vanish again before we can even register their names. Zayed looked down at the baby. His small fingers gripped the edge of Zayed's sleeve, as if he knew somehow that this man was the only barrier between him and something unspoken. He made a decision. I want to pay for her care. And the babies. Private room. Full security. The doctor hesitated. That's not how things usually. Zayed pulled out his phone and tapped the screen. Within seconds, he had transferred a donation large enough to run the clinic for a year. Now it is. The doctor blinked, then nodded. Very well. A few hours passed. The baby was fed, cleaned, wrapped in soft cloth. The woman, whose name no one knew, remained unconscious. Zayed refused to leave her side. He stood by the glass window, arms crossed, watching her breathe. That's when the knock came. 3 sharp taps at the clinic's back entrance. The nurse peeked through the blinds and stiffened. Zayed turned. Who is it? The nurse looked uneasy. 3 men. Not locals. Black SUVs. No plates. Zayed's instincts, honed in boardrooms and battlefields of business, sharpened instantly. Don't open the door. The doctor joined them, visibly tense. Sometimes they come, asking questions, pretending to be from aid organizations, but they're not. Zayed stepped outside, ignoring their protests. He walked calmly toward the back entrance. The men waiting there were tall, dressed in mismatched uniforms, faces shaded by caps. One of them stepped forward. We're here for the woman, he said in French-accented Arabic. She's part of a case we're tracking. She took something that doesn't belong to her. Zayed's expression didn't change. What exactly did she take? The man smirked. You wouldn't understand. This is official. Zayed crossed his arms, his voice cold. Then show me paperwork. Silence. No ID, Zayed pressed. The man's jaw twitched. We don't have time for... I do, Zayed interrupted. And I'll tell you what I told the doctor. No one touches that woman, or her child. If you try, you'll answer not to this clinic, but to the Al-Masri family. The 3 men stiffened. The name meant something, even out here. You've made a mistake, one of them hissed. No, Zayed said, his voice steel. You did. The men backed off, muttering as they returned to their SUV. But as they drove off into the dust, Zayed felt something cold settle in his chest. This wasn't over. He returned to the woman's room. Her eyes were open, and she was staring at him. For a moment, neither of them moved. Zayed stood just inside the door, watching her. The woman's dark eyes, sunken from dehydration and suffering, held a clarity now that was almost unbearable. They weren't just looking at him. They were searching him, weighing him, asking him something silent and deep. He approached slowly, careful not to alarm her. In his arms, the baby shifted, letting out a small whimper. At the sound, her gaze softened. Tears welled up in her cracked eyes, spilling over onto the worn pillow beneath her. "You're safe," Zayed said quietly, unsure if she understood him. "No one will hurt you here." She blinked once, a slow, exhausted gesture. Then, with a trembling hand, she gestured toward herself and the child. "His name is Amir," she whispered, voice hoarse from thirst and exhaustion. Zayed leaned closer, straining to hear. "Amir," he repeated softly, feeling the weight of the name settle in the room. The woman's lips trembled. "Promise me. Protect him." Zayed frowned. "Why? Who's after you?" She closed her eyes, gathering strength. Every word seemed carved from pain. "They want him, because of who his father is," she said finally. "Power, money, revenge." Zayed's mind raced. Was this baby the heir to some secret fortune, a target of tribal vengeance? He didn't know enough yet, but he knew danger when he smelled it. "You don't have to tell me now," Zayed said, voice low and steady. "First, you need to heal." "No," she croaked, her hand gripping his sleeve with surprising strength. "If I die, you must know." Zayed's throat tightened. He nodded once, gravely, seating himself on the edge of the bed, still holding Amir close to his chest. "My name is Amara," she began, voice breaking. "I was born in a village no one remembers. When I was young, I worked for a powerful man, rich, untouchable. I thought I was lucky." Her hands twisted the bedsheet as she spoke. "But when I became pregnant, he cast me aside, said the child was a problem, said people like us were disposable." Zayed's hands curled into fists. "So I ran," she continued, tears falling freely now. "I ran across deserts, hid in refugee camps, starved. But I kept Amir alive, because I knew he deserved better." Zayed reached out, covering her shaking hand with his own. "You were right to run," he said firmly. "And you found someone who will not let anything happen to him." Amara smiled faintly, a fragile, heartbreaking smile. "They will come," she whispered. "They always do." Zayed didn't flinch. "Then they'll find they chose the wrong man to threaten." A soft knock interrupted them. The nurse peeked inside, her face pale. "Sir, there's a man here to see you." Zayed stood, instinctively shifting Amir closer to his chest. "Who?" She hesitated. "He says he's from the government." Amara's body tensed visibly. Zayed turned back to her. "Trust me," he murmured. "I will not hand you over." Her eyes locked onto his, desperate, pleading. "I swear it," he added, voice like iron. She relaxed slightly, but her fingers still clutched the sheet as if it were the only anchor left in her world. Zayed handed Amir gently to the nurse. "Stay with them," he ordered. "Don't leave this room, no matter what happens." The nurse nodded, cradling Amir protectively. Outside in the dusty waiting area, a man in a tan suit waited, sunglasses perched on his nose despite the dim light. He held a leather folder in one hand and exuded the practiced confidence of someone used to getting what he wanted. "Mr. Al-Masri," the man said with a cold smile, "I believe you have something that belongs to us." Zayed's expression didn't change. "I don't believe I do." The man chuckled, low and humorless. "Let's not make this difficult. The woman and the child, both are of interest to powerful parties. You're a businessman. You understand when it's better to let things go." Zayed stepped forward, invading the man's personal space. "You listen to me," he said quietly, dangerously. "I don't care who sent you. I don't care what you were promised. If you so much as breathe the wrong way toward them again, you will regret it." The man stiffened. "You're making a mistake." "No," Zayed said. "You are." The man's smile faded. His sunglasses slid down just enough to reveal eyes full of rage. "This isn't over," he hissed. Zayed watched as the man turned on his heel and left the clinic, dust swirling around his retreating figure. But even as the door swung closed behind him, Zayed knew the storm had only just begun. That night the clinic seemed to shrink under the pressure of unseen eyes. Every creak of the wind against the windows, every distant engine rumble, made the nurses flinch and check the locks twice. Even the moonlight felt sharp and dangerous, slicing through the curtains like knives. Zayed sat awake beside Amara's bed, a silent sentinel. In his arms, Amir slept, his tiny fist curled into Zayed's shirt, as if anchoring himself to this new, fragile world. Amara dozed fitfully, her breathing shallow, her face lined with fear even in sleep. Zayed couldn't stop replaying the encounter with the government agent, the cold threat, the certainty in his voice. He had faced rivals in boardrooms across the world, men who thought money made them gods. But this was different. This was raw, brutal. It was life or death. And it wasn't his life that was at stake this time. He had to make a choice. Stay here and wait for the next move, or take control of the board. He stood, moving quietly to the hallway. The clinic was nearly deserted at this hour, Only a few nurses remained, huddled together in a small lounge, sipping bitter coffee and murmuring in low voices. Zayed pulled out his satellite phone and dialed a private number, a number he hadn't used in years. It rang twice before a gravelly voice answered. Al-Masri. It's Zayed, he said quietly. I need extraction. The voice didn't hesitate. Coordinates? Zayed rattled them off. There was a pause. Trouble? Heavy. Another pause. Then, 3 hours. Be ready. The line went dead. Zayed returned to Amara's room. She was awake now, watching him, sensing the shift in the air. We're leaving, he said simply. She nodded, no questions asked. She trusted him now. Maybe she had no other choice. Or maybe, just maybe, she saw something in him that he had long forgotten himself. Strength, compassion, honor. 3 hours stretched into an eternity. Zayed didn't let Amir leave his arms once. He kept one eye on the clock, the other on the door. Then, just before dawn, the distant thump of rotor blades cut through the stillness. The extraction team. Zayed moved fast. He wrapped Amir tightly, shielding him from the cool desert air, and helped Amara to her feet. She staggered, weak, but determined. Outside, a black military helicopter hovered low, sand whipping into a furious storm around it. Men in tactical gear jumped out, scanning the perimeter with cold efficiency. The clinic staff watched from the windows, faces pale with fear and awe. Zayed led Amara and Amir across the open yard, every step pounding with urgency. As they neared the helicopter, a shout rang out behind them. Zayed turned. 3 SUVs were barreling toward the clinic, headlights blazing through the dust. The men from before, and they weren't coming to talk. Move! Zayed barked. The extraction team responded instantly, forming a protective shield around them. Gunmetal glinted under jackets. Orders crackled through radios. Shots fired. Sharp, cracking sounds that tore through the dawn. Zayed pushed Amara and Amir up the ramp of the helicopter. A bullet whizzed past his shoulder, so close he felt its heat. Inside, the pilot shouted over the roar of the blades. We have to go, now! Zayed grabbed a rifle from one of the guards and returned fire with brutal precision, buying precious seconds. Then he leaped aboard, grabbing the side rail as the helicopter lifted off. Below, the SUVs skidded to a halt. Men spilled out, firing wildly, their faces twisted in rage as they grew smaller and smaller beneath them. Amir cried out in fear. Zayed wrapped him tighter against his chest, whispering soothing words he hadn't spoken to anyone in years. It's over, he said. You're safe. But as the helicopter banked toward the sunrise, Amara clutched his arm, her eyes wide with terror. No, she said, voice shaking. You don't understand. Zayed frowned. What? She swallowed hard, looking back at the desert below them, where the men still fired into the sky. They're not just after me, she said. They're after you now, too." Zayed stared at her, the weight of her words sinking like iron into his chest. In saving them, he had declared war, and there would be no going back. The helicopter cut across the early morning sky, slicing through layers of rising heat and dust. Zayed sat rigid, Amir pressed to his chest, Amara gripping the seat beside him with trembling hands. The noise was deafening, but inside his mind, a far greater storm raged. He had crossed a line. Saving Amara and Amir had placed a target not only on their backs, but on his as well. In the world he came from, money solved most problems. Influence silenced the rest. But this was different. This was blood, power, old vengeance, and they would not stop until they took everything. He shifted his gaze to Amara. Her face was pale against the canvas seat, her hands twisting together in her lap. "You need to tell me everything," Zayed said, leaning close so she could hear. She nodded, swallowing hard. "The man who fathered Amir. He's not just rich," she whispered, her voice barely rising over the engine's roar. "He controls networks, arms, politics, corruption across borders. He promised me a future. Lied. When I became pregnant, he said I carried a mistake. Something he had to erase." Zayed's hands tightened around Amir instinctively. "He sent men after me," Amara continued, her voice cracking. "I escaped the first time, but he has reach, even here. No matter where I run, he finds me." Zayed felt a cold fury bloom inside his chest. He had spent his life negotiating deals with men in glass towers, trading billions over handshakes and signatures. But he knew this wasn't business. This was war, fought with bodies, not contracts. "And now?" he asked. Her eyes shone with desperation. "Now that you helped me, you've made yourself his enemy too." The helicopter pitched slightly as the pilot banked east, heading for Zayed's private compound beyond the Algerian border, a place few knew existed, built exactly for emergencies like this. Zayed leaned back, thinking fast. He couldn't protect them alone. He needed allies. He needed power bigger than money. And he needed to make a decision. Hide forever, or strike first. The pilot's voice crackled through the headset. "Sir, incoming call on the encrypted line." Zayed took the headset and answered. It was Tariq, his old security chief. "You've been compromised," Tariq said bluntly. "News of the extraction spread. There's a bounty on you now, not just in North Africa, internationally." "How much?" Zayed asked grimly. $10 million, Tariq replied. "Dead, not alive." Zayed exhaled slowly, a price on his head, just for saving a woman and her child. "Tell the others to secure the compound," Zayed ordered. "Double the perimeter. Prepare for guests." "Understood," Tariq said. The line went dead. He turned to Amara, who was watching him, fear and guilt etched into her face. "This isn't your fault," Zayed said firmly, reading her thoughts. "They made the choice to come after me. And now I make mine." Amara opened her mouth to respond, but a sudden lurch of the helicopter cut her off. The engine coughed once, twice. The pilot cursed over the radio. "We're being tracked. Heat signature incoming." Zayed's blood turned to ice. "Missile lock." "Hold on," the pilot shouted. The helicopter plunged into a sharp dive, the desert spinning wildly outside the windows. Amir wailed, clutching tighter to Zayed's shirt. An explosion rocked the air behind them, deafening, brutal. Zayed threw his body over Amara and Amir, shielding them as shrapnel rained from the sky. The pilot fought the controls, muscles straining. "We're hit, losing hydraulics." The compound's coordinates flashed on the console. Close. So close. "Brace!" the pilot roared. Zayed gritted his teeth and held on. The ground rushed up to meet them. With a bone-shattering jolt, the helicopter slammed into the desert floor, skidding, grinding, metal screaming against earth. Sand engulfed them, a blinding, choking cloud. Silence followed. Heavy, absolute. Zayed coughed, blood in his mouth, as he fought to stay conscious. Amara stirred beside him, moaning weakly. Amir sobbed in his arms, alive but terrified. Above them, the frame of the helicopter creaked dangerously, threatening collapse. Zayed forced himself up, mind screaming one command: "Move! Now!" Through the haze of dust and smoke, he saw black vehicles approaching from the horizon, not rescuers, enemies, and they were coming fast. Zayed stumbled out of the wreckage, clutching Amir against his chest, his body screaming in protest. Blood trickled down his temple, but he didn't stop. Amara followed, limping but determined, her hand gripping his jacket like a lifeline. The black SUVs sped closer, their engines snarling over the broken earth. There was no time to think, only to run. In the distance, barely visible through the dust, Zayed spotted a battered old service truck abandoned near the edge of the desert. A relic from some forgotten expedition. He didn't hesitate. Gritting his teeth, he dragged Amara toward it, hoisted her inside, and threw himself behind the wheel. The truck groaned, but roared to life. Tires screamed against sand as Zayed slammed his foot down. The enemy vehicles surged after them, headlights cutting vicious lines through the swirling dust. A shot cracked past the truck, splintering the side mirror. Zayed didn't flinch. His mind was clear now. There was no fear, only resolve. He wouldn't let them take Amara. He wouldn't let them touch Amir. Not while he still drew breath. He tightened his grip on the wheel and drove straight toward the horizon, heart hammering like a war drum. They raced across the desert, the truck rattling dangerously with every bump and ditch. Amara clutched Amir tightly, whispering prayers under her breath. Zayed pushed the old machine harder than it was ever meant to go, feeling it shudder beneath him. The black SUVs gained ground, relentless, Closer. Closer. Up ahead, the glint of a fence appeared. A security perimeter. The edge of his private compound. Salvation. But behind them, the enemy vehicles fanned out, boxing them in. Zayed knew what he had to do. At the last second, he yanked the wheel hard to the right, sending the truck into a wild spin that kicked up a blinding storm of sand. He leapt out, dragging Amara and Amir with him into the dust cloud. Shots rang out, blind and wild. They dove behind a rocky outcropping, hearts pounding. Then, out of the dust, emerged black-clad figures. But they weren't enemies. Tariq's men, armed, trained, furious. A firefight erupted, precise, brutal, over in minutes. When the dust finally settled, the enemy was defeated. The air smelled of smoke and iron. Tariq approached, rifle still smoking, his face grim. "We've secured the area," he said. "You're safe now." Zayed collapsed to his knees. Amir still clutched against his chest, and for the first time in years, he felt tears sting his eyes. They had survived. Inside the safety of the compound, Amara and Amir were given a room filled with light and warmth. Doctors tended to their wounds. Fresh clothes replaced the tattered ones they had worn for too long. Zayed watched from a distance, something tight and painful blooming inside his chest. They weren't just survivors anymore. They were his responsibility, his family. Amara approached him days later, when the chaos had finally settled. She stood in the garden courtyard, the baby asleep in her arms, the scent of jasmine heavy in the air. "You could have left us," she said quietly. "You could have saved yourself." Zayed shook his head. "There are things in life worth more than survival. Things worth fighting for." She looked at him then, not as a savior, not as a billionaire, but as a man. "Thank you," she whispered. For the first time in a long time, Zayed smiled. Not the polished, empty smile of the public figure. A real smile, full of something he had nearly forgotten. Hope. Months passed. The world moved on, but Zayed's life had changed forever. He adopted Amir legally, using every ounce of his power to protect him from the shadows that once hunted him. Amara remained by his side, not as a refugee, not as a charity case, but as a partner, a friend, and something more he dared not yet name. Together, they built something new out of the ashes of fear, a family bound not by blood, but by choice. One evening, as the sun dipped low over the desert, Zayed stood on the balcony of the compound, Amir toddling at his side. Amara joined them, laughter in her voice, her smile soft and luminous. Zayed lifted Amir high into the air, and the boy squealed with joy, his tiny hands reaching for the endless sky. For the first time in his life, Zayed understood. Wealth was not counted in numbers or possessions. It was counted in moments like this, in lives saved, in futures rewritten, in love freely given and fiercely protected. And as he looked out over the golden sands, hand in hand with the family he had found in the most unlikely way, Zayed al-Masri knew he had finally found what all his fortune could never buy: home.